So this here is a Physique ARTICA R5 winter shoe, and if you're anything like me and you live in the UK or a country where you have terrible weather, these might be the answer to all of your prayers. In essence, it's a basic shoe underneath with a neoprene sock that you slide your foot into with a waterproof and windproof top. So essentially you put your foot into this neoprene sock here, lace it up using this lacing system, tuck that in, do the zip up, do the cuff up around the ankle, and hey presto, you should have a completely waterproof and windproof shoe. The sole is carbon injected sole, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Other than that, it is pretty much as you'd expect. It essentially takes the need for having an overshoe going over your shoe because it's all built into this upper up here. It retails at $189.95, but as usual with anything, you can get these at a decent price, especially if you're a fairly standard size. You can get them for anything from 150 to 160 pounds. And I'm also very aware that I'm a bit late to the party with a review like these, but these are new to me and it's a part of my plan to get back commuting in the winter. Let's see how they perform on the bike. So first ride out in the Physique winter shoes, and as you can probably tell, it's not exactly the most arctic of days to be testing these winter boots out. However, it is just below 10 degrees, around about 9 degrees, certainly cold enough to be regretting not being able to find my full finger gloves in the workshop yet because we're still unpacking from moving house. But it's a bit of a chill in the wind, and it has rained whilst I've been out on the bike. You probably can't see it just yet on the roads, but it has been showering and it's certainly been muddy. I've been riding around our fake Belgium roads around here, out on the moors in the farmland, and certainly managed to get my my overshoes wet. So I can't exactly talk about the windproof or waterproof capabilities so far, other than to say, well, so far in the light showers and riding through the puddles, my feet are not wet, but it's not exactly torrential and it's not exactly blowing a hoolie. So we'll have to leave that for another ride. But what we can talk about is the shoe itself and how that feels. So let's start with the sole. Should always start with the sole. A good sole is hard to find. So it claims that it's carbon injected sole. Anything that says something like that, carbon composite or carbon injected, just means it's plastic really. It's a relatively expensive shoe, just shy of £200, and you'd kind of expect on an expensive shoe to get a fully carbon sole. And for normal sort of riding like I'm doing at the minute, I can't really notice any flex, but when I get out of the saddle and give it a bit of beans or go up over a little bit of a climb, there is that noticeable flex in the sole that you would find in a shoe sort of around about the 100 or below price mark, which is a little bit disappointing. However, I have got a theory about this. Well then, if you think about most of our road shoes that we wear, they're designed mainly for hot weather with vents and breathable capabilities in the upper, and in most cases the upper's really not that involved. It's a fairly simple sock really that you put your feet into, and the most exotic really it becomes is the kind of enclosure, the boa sort of element to it. But with this shoe, it's far more complex. We've got an inner sock that's made of like a neoprene material with a drawstring which pulls your foot snug inside, and then you've got the outer shoe with the zip on top of it. And essentially, that's where I think you're spending your money. And so what we've got is the upper of a shoe. You've got the upper of a shoe that's worth, you know, £200, but you've got the sole of a shoe that's worth £100. Now, if the price point is around about that £200 mark, what you got to think about is if you want a carbon sole on it as well, you're probably looking at a £300 to £350 shoe. Where's the compromise? Well, the compromise ultimately has got to be that what we're after buying here is a winter shoe, something to keep your feet warm and dry in the wind and rain. And in my opinion so far, it's going to do the job on that very, very well, because that area of the shoe is fantastically built. Can I compromise on it not being such a great stiff sole? I think I can at this price point, because I'm getting a decent sole. It's not awful. It's not like some of the cheaper sort of 50, 60 pound race shoes that you might buy that feel like you're riding in a trainer, but it's also not at that level of an S-Fire or the Bontrager Triple X's that I ride, which have no give in it whatsoever. But that's the compromise we got. I want a winter shoe, and I've got a winter shoe. But that is one area that I think it does fall down, but I'd accept that on the price. The other thing that I've also noticed is that one of the reasons why I like physique shoes is I have normal size feet, but they're very narrow. I was that kid at school who couldn't get shoes narrow enough, and they always like bent on the top, you know, and I've always had that problem with narrow shoes, trying to find something that fits. And physique have got a pretty narrow toe box area, which makes it quite comfortable for me, and the other physique shoes I've always had have really fit really well. So I was pretty confident that these would fit well too, and they certainly are not wide. They, when you pull the drawstring on the inside, they fit fantastically well. They feel really snug. It almost feels like a triple boa sort of type shoe. Really snug and doing the job it's supposed to do. However, the overshoe element of it, when you buy separate overshoes, obviously most of the time they're quite stretchy fabrics. They're a bit of a pain to get on, but once they are on, they're very snug. All the way from the velo toes that I've used before for time trialing, which morning, the velo toes that I've worn before, if any of you have ever worn them, you'll know what a nightmare they are to get on. But once they're on, there's pretty much no bulk to it whatsoever. However, what I think is a bit odd about these shoes is that when you do them up, the top zip section that goes over the arch of your foot and up to your ankle is actually really quite bulky, which, you know, in essence isn't really a problem, except that every now and then, depending on your foot position or your cornering or what your body position is on your bike, you're going to get an element of rub against your cranks, and that can be bloody annoying if I'm honest. But there doesn't seem to be any way to adjust that. The actual gaiter over the shoe is a fixed size. It's extremely waterproof, it's extremely windproof, but it's also extremely bulky, unnecessarily so. Morning. It doesn't need to be as bulky as that. But then again, what do I know about textiles? I'm assuming if they were to make it out of something more stretchy, it wouldn't be as windy and waterproof as it is. Sure, I could move my cleat inwards a little bit to push my foot out, but that's not my riding position. But I might have to have a look at that anyway once I re-tap this annoying thread issue that I've got in the right shoe. Perhaps I'll move them over and see if that alleviates it. But so far, in terms of fit, for my feet, narrow feet, absolutely fantastic. They feel like a road shoe, really supportive on the inside. The only downside being the slight flex in the sole at this price point, understandable. And also this slightly bulky gaiter over the top of it, which in certain circumstances can cause a little bit of rub on the cranks. Other than that, it's a pretty good shoe. So once I got back from that bike ride, I had to give the bike a wash, and whilst I was doing that, I decided to wash my shoes, but also give it a bit of a drenching with the hose to see how it stood up to one of those situations where you're riding through a deep puddle and then half a second later you expect it to seep into your socks, and you know that's going to be a pretty miserable ride from there on in. And then, finally, yay, we had some terrible weather. Do me a favour, if you like seeing me suffering a little bit to do reviews, because I really would rather be on my turbo today. If you want to see more reviews like this and pressure me into going out and doing winter kit tests and all sorts of other things, triathlon training tips, cycling tips, seeing me take on some crazy challenges in 2022, then do me a favour, hit the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below, because it's the sort of thing that make me pull on my my rain shoes and get out of the house so that I can do these videos. It really does help the channel, so please do that. Thank you. On we go. It's very windy today, very windy indeed. stuff everywhere. Morning, mate. The biggest drawback, actually I better shout because of the wind. The biggest drawback with reviewing winter gear is you have to come out and ride in winter weather, which sucks a little bit. As Bo Burnham said, it's a beautiful day to stay inside. It's been a storm overnight. I think the back end of the wind is going to be with us until sort of just after lunchtime, but it is windy, and I decided to pick a route where it's unlikely there's going to be a huge amount of trees possibly to have come down. Heard a few sirens. Fire brigade were out this morning. Hopefully nothing too serious, but I'm assuming it'll be something to do with the wind. And if you can see the ripples on the big puddles there, it's rained already this morning. It's due to rain again in a minute, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to just talk briefly about the shoes, because annoyingly I've had to come out on a day when I'd normally be sat inside on the turbo, but this is pretty typical British commuting weather in my opinion. I'm heading directly towards the coast at the minute, so I've got a block headwind, so I hope you can hear me over the wind. And it's rained, it's going to rain, it's raining now. I'm wearing this Decathlon rain jacket, which is perfect weather for this really. I did a review for that, I'll leave a link up here on this jacket some time back. But these boots so far have been absolutely ace, I have to say. I've not got cold toes. I've been riding now for about an hour and 10 minutes. I wanted to leave it for about an hour because that's when I usually find my hands warm up and my feet go cold. It usually takes about an hour. It's about 6 degrees, between 4 and 6 degrees depending on where you are today. 6 degrees in the town I live in, 4 degrees out here on the moors, considerably colder. Managed to find a pair of winter gloves this time round just to keep my hands a bit warmer. But the boots themselves have been ace. I haven't felt any water inside my boots in any way, or my socks, and the gaiters have worked really, really well. The cuffs at the top have worked really well, kept all the water out, and not a hint of it being windy inside the shoe to cool my feet down in any way, which is brilliant. So just to comment a bit further on this sole flexibility, there is definitely some flexibility in the sole which would be nicer not to have, mainly noticeable just behind the cleat, you know, either when you're doing an effort, which, let's face it, if you're commuting or you're doing winter rides, it's unlikely you'd be doing efforts, more likely to do those on the turbo in the winter. So not a major problem, but I have noticed it when just getting out the saddle a little bit to go over motorway bridges and the like, or just putting a little bit of extra power down to close a junction or whatever it might be. There's just that little bit of flex, but it really is nothing that I would say is a negative. I know I keep going on about it, but I think it's because it's the only negative I have sort of discovered. In terms of all I'm wearing today on my shoes, on my feet, are just a relatively thin pair of merino wool socks, Endura ones. I love them. When you find a pair of socks that fit and work brilliantly for you, stick to them, don't you? So the Endura merino wool socks, I think I've got about a dozen pair of those in my drawer at home, and that's it. They're not particularly thick, and my feet feel toasty, I have to say, like properly toasty, like spring toasty. Pair of socks and a normal pair of shoes warm. I wouldn't say there's anything noticeable about what's going on with my feet, and from someone that does suffer from numb feet, that is an absolute bloody bonus, I have to say. So a real win with these shoes in terms of a winter shoe so far. God, it is bloody windy and bloody rainy, and I think I'm going to turn tail, think about heading home now. because I think I've done all I need to do. Oh. So let's look at the conclusion then. In terms of the pluses with this shoe, if you're looking for a winter shoe, the first and second most important things are that they're waterproof and windproof. Every combination of shoe and shoe cover I've ever tried in the past has always had some kind of a compromise attached to it. It's not the case with this shoe. They are waterproof, they are windproof, and they are absolutely comfortable, not least due to this amazing inner sole that they have inside, which has this lovely fleecy Roubaix type top side to it that your foot goes on, and then underneath, we have this silver kind of almost old school approach to reflecting the cold away or keeping the heat in, whichever way you want to look at it. These inner soles are absolutely fantastic. So, the brilliant thing about these winter shoes is they are brilliant winter shoes. They keep your feet warm and they keep them dry. What more could you ask for? And what about the negatives? Well, there aren't actually that many. One negative I would say is it's got this nice reflector on the back here, which is any of you riding in the dark or in the kind of low light will know. Anything moving that reflects the light is fantastic. There are none on the front, which I think is a bit of an oversight really. They could have easily put some kind of reflective area on the toe and even on the ankle up here. So that's one oversight in my opinion. The other one is the one that I've sort of banged on a little bit on the bike, and it's this flexible sole. It's not a massive drawback in my opinion. I think that there is a compromise that needs to be reached for a sub £200 shoe. As I said on the bike, I think if we were to get this level of waterproofness and also a stiff sole, we'd be looking at a £300 plus shoe. And I think that's unnecessary for the type of training and the type of commuting that most people are going to be wearing this for. The other thing that I mentioned before as well is the fact that with my feet, particularly the shape they are, that this overshoe can be a bit baggy. Now, it seemed to be worse in the first ride as it was in the second. The second ride wasn't so bad. I hadn't noticed it kind of being overly baggy, but they are baggy. There's no doubt about it. Now, I'm assuming that's because most overshoes that you have that go over your shoes are made of an elasticy material. This isn't. This is a very rigid waterproof material. I will take the bagginess on the top over having something that will let water through. But those are my three negatives: lack of reflectors on the front, the slightly bendy sole, particularly underneath the cleat here, and the fact that this can be a bit baggy on the top. If you aren't somebody that can afford a pair of winter shoes like this, here are some tips that you can apply to your winter shoes, and I have tried all of these over the years. Some of these are proper old school hints, tips and tricks. The first thing, and it applies to these shoes as well, is not to wear overly bulky socks and not to tighten your shoes up too much. One of the main things you need to think about with trying to keep heat is that once you warm up, you need to keep that blood circulating. I've made this mistake dozens of times where I've worn too thick of socks and tightened my shoes up a bit too much, and it's cut the circulation off and my feet have got freezing. So that's the first one. Don't wear overly thick socks, don't overly tighten your shoes up. The second thing is to try and tape up the vents on your shoes so it doesn't let up any water. If you do have vents on your shoes, you can buy waterproof tape that will go over the vents and keep the water from coming in as best you can. You will still find water coming in through here on most pairs of shoes. Obviously these are all a fixed unit on this shoe, but yeah, one of the other areas that water can get in is through here. So if there's any way of taping the inside of the shoe to stop any of that coming in, I'd seriously recommend that. The next thing, we start to get old school here, is to put your feet in carrier bags. Now, this isn't ideal because obviously a carrier bag isn't very breathable, but I would put my feet, my socks on my feet, and then I would put carrier bags over my feet, then I'd put my feet in the shoes, and then I would put my overshoes on top of that because my feet would get so cold they would act as a bit of a barrier. So obviously you can find the right size bag for your size shoes, but that was another trick that I used to apply, along with tip number 4, which is to apply some silver foil around your feet as well. Now this one does work, so much so, as I pointed out, they've actually applied this silver foil approach to the bottom of their insoles for these physique shoes. But you can essentially put your socks on, then put silver foil around over your toes and around the arch of your foot, and if you want to, you could then put them in carrier bags, then you can put them in your shoes, then you can put your overshoes on, or you could just buy a pair of these, because I feel like all of those issues that I've been having with my winter shoes and all the hacks that I've tried over the years have been solved by this. Is it a perfect shoe? No, it's not a perfect shoe. There are a couple of issues with it. However, for the price and for the most fundamental things of a winter shoe, does it keep your feet dry and does it keep the wind out? The answer is yes. And in that respect, for the money that they are, this is a bloody good shoe.